Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining this Thursday's show. Up first, still a high wind warning out for the AKwx area till 7 p.m. this evening, and looking for northeast winds gusting to 75 miles per hour. And then there's a blizzard warning out for the Pribilof Islands, both St. Paul and St. George, and that's out until 1 p.m. tomorrow afternoon, Friday afternoon, and that's for northeast winds to 60 miles an hour in gusts and 1 to 3 inches of snow expected to fall. So that'll create whiteout conditions in areas at times later tonight, or for tonight through tomorrow morning till about 1 p.m. the way it looks at this time. And then we've got winter weather advisories out for the St. Lawrence Island area, Bering Strait coast, Yukon, Kuskokwim Delta, Lower Yukon Valley, Nunivak Island, St. Matthew Island, and Bristol Bay is for tonight into tomorrow. For snow and blowing snow, several inches, expecting anywhere from 6 to 9 inches possible, or 3 to 6 inches actually. It'll vary across the entire area there, but those gusty winds expected to create visibilities less than a half mile at times in blowing snow. And then for tonight into tomorrow for the Kodiak Island area, as well as the Kenai Peninsula, eastern Kenai Peninsula, up into western Prince William Sound, Thompson Pass, Seward, on up to Portage in those areas. Winter weather advisory there for tomorrow for several inches of snow coming in, and then moving eastward there over the Panhandle, northern Panhandle, Juneau and up into Skagway and Haines, Klondike Highway area over to Gustuvos. Boy, my pronunciation is a little off today. Anyway, look for it, 6 to 9 inches of snow there tonight, and then that should ease up tomorrow. And so that's when the advisory is out for the overnight period. So moving on to satellite imagery, you can see the heaviest clouds here, mostly moving northward, east of the Panhandle, but clipping the southern areas today, low center right up through here. And the heaviest rainfall amounts occurring over the southern southeast coast, but precipitation all the way up into Haines towards Skagway and out along the coast. But that mostly in the form of snow up around Haines today, and then all rain down over the southern Panhandle. And also some moisture streaming northward here with a trough still producing areas of light snow over the eastern interior that lingered down into northern Cook Inlet. Anchorage carrying flurries all afternoon. Very light snow, and a lot of cold air out here over the northern Bering Sea, back up into the North Slope areas and the Arctic coast. Variable clouds coming down out of the north and northeast, actually kind of more of an easterly drift there this afternoon. Then this frontal system out here to the west, strong low pressure here just south of Adak and Atka, front pushing east-northeastward. That brought strong winds to the eastern Aleutians, winds on the increase here for the Alaska Peninsula. Winds gusting upwards of 60 miles an hour this afternoon at St. George, but still no precipitation reaching the area yet. Precipitation, snow-producing clouds just to your south and extending off to the southeast here, and then wrapping back around from the north back to the west, and pretty easterly flow now, but as the system pulls off to the east-northeast, that will eventually turn the flow more northeast at the surface and then northerly, and that'll pull again more cold air southward, and looking for a pretty cold weekend here, or at least into the first day of the weekend from the Pribilofs up over the northern Bering Sea and into all of interior Alaska, except south central Alaska and the Panhandle. 953 millibar low there south of Adak and Atka, and that brought, 84 mile an hour wind gusts to Nikolsky so far. They're right in advance of the frontal boundary there. St. George Island up around 60 miles an hour for a peak wind gust. Dutch Harbor at 55 to 60 plus miles per hour on Alaska, Dutch Harbor in those areas, and winds on the increase here for the Alaska Peninsula area. And also snow edging northward there toward the Pribilof Islands, and snow and rain mixed over the eastern Aleutians and snow beginning over the Alaska Peninsula, and then turning to snow showers out toward Shimei and Attu. And this system tracking up to the north there, that brought a 55-mile-an-hour wind gust to Cape Decision earlier today as the front advanced into the area there. But heaviest rainfall amounts, 12-hour period ending at mid-afternoon today. Craig picked up about 0.8 of an inch of rain, while 0.7 of an inch fell at Cake, Heidelberg, and Ketchikan. And then lighter amounts up to the north there. Juneau only a few hundredths of an inch of precipitation, and about 0.02 of an inch of light snow fell at Anchorage International Airport today. Clear skies, though, down toward Seward, Resurrection Bay, due to north winds gusting to 37 miles an hour at Seward. And pretty clear day, actually. Shouldn't have these clouds in over Kodiak. It was mostly clear today there with west winds gusting 20 to 30 miles an hour. Areas of light snow, Yukon Delta, up through St. Lawrence Island, flurries and fog with winds on the light side up through that entire area up through here. But winds will increase here over the next couple of days over the northern Bering Sea and diminish down here over the southern Bering Sea. I'm getting ahead of myself, but anyway, along this trough here in the east, areas of light snow and snow showers from the Copper River Basin all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast, North Slope, areas of light snow there with fog. And for tonight, the system tracks eastward, the front pushing out still in advance there, approaching southwest Kodiak Island late tonight. And winter weather advisory for Kodiak Island later tonight and tomorrow for snow, several inches there, snow and blowing snow. Starting to mix with rain there down to the south coast, Sitkinak up toward maybe AKwx and those areas there. But mostly snow, especially with alien elevation overnight tonight. Snow and blowing snow on the increase, Bristol Bay into the southern Yukon Delta, southern Kuskokwim Valley, fair central interior, fair in the western interior, and winds beginning to pick up a little bit here over the northern Bering Sea, but conditions dry and cold up through there. And this thing up here to the northeast, still carrying some light snow with it from the 40-mile country up across the Yukon Flats, all the way to the eastern Arctic coastal areas. And looks like rain becomes more showery, definitely a big drop-off in the winds here for the Panhandle, and even the precipitation rates will diminish, but still have that winter weather advisory with that low tracking right up over the northern Panhandle. And then for the day on Friday, tomorrow, this front definitely brings an increase in the wind, rain, and snow to the North Gulf Coast, with snow on the increase in the upslope areas mainly. Here the mountainous terrain over south central Alaska and the Copper River Basin. And snow, areas of blowing snow, Bristol Bay up into the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, maybe the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Coming back around, northerly winds, whatever changes over to rain will change back to snow tomorrow afternoon as that cold air comes southward. You can see the flow becoming more northeasterly and north-northeasterly with time, but a lot less gradient here now over the Aleutians with a low center weakening and tracking northeast to the Alaska Peninsula. So winds will be considerably lighter tomorrow than they were today. Flurries, not much change except for an increase in the winds here, St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait coast. Winds still light over the North Slope and Arctic coast, and fair and dry over the interior. And then for the day Saturday, area of kind of a widespread area of light snow and snow showers from the Seward Peninsula all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula. Winds maybe up to 40 miles an hour, St. Lawrence Island, 45 to 50 miles an hour, places like Tin City through the Bering Strait there. Otherwise, lighter winds and colder temperatures with a widespread area of light snow and snow showers from the Pribilofs down to the eastern Aleutians. And then with this low center out over the west central Aleutian areas. And now that low kicks to just south of Kodiak Island from Bristol Bay there. And this trough extending north, and then southeast flow continues. Actually, this is another low center. The original one kind of moves up into here and weakens into a trough. A new one comes up toward Kodiak Island. That's going to increase the wind, rain, and snow along the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle in the afternoon hours. Low temperatures over the Panhandle tonight in the 30s, below zero inland areas of southern Alaska, especially Copper River Basin and the Kuskokwim Valley, and either side of zero for Bristol Bay, mid-20s Kodiak Island. Highs tomorrow, single numbers, inland areas, teens, so Susitna, Manuska Valley, 20s for the south central Alaska area, near 40 for Kodiak Island, and in the 30s to lower 40s for the southeast coast. Lows Saturday morning, all in the 30s, lower to mid for the Panhandle. and about 6 for the Copper River Basin there at Gulkana, Glen Allen, teens and 20s. South Central Alaska still below 0 for McGrath and Nikolai. Mid-30s Kodiak Island, 15 to 22 for Bristol Bay. Highs the following day, we've got single numbers, otherwise 20s South Central Alaska, 30s lower 40s for the southeast coast. Up in the interior, cold, well below 0 all the way to the Arctic coast and westward to St. Lawrence Island, followed by highs staying below 0, right around 0 here along the Alaska Range. Below 0 to the north and to the west, above 0 to the south. That pattern holds through Saturday afternoon. So going to the southwest coast, near 20 below for St. Lawrence Island, teens for the Pribilofs tonight, highs 20s for the Pribilofs, lower to mid-30s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic, some IFR early on here over the Panhandle, bigger area up well, north of the Alaska Range here, all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast. Pretty good for the remainder of the interior, and just VFR, northern Bering Sea, right on up into the Chukchi, and a little bit of marginal VFR here in the central interior. Then the IFR zone moving pretty rapidly east-northeastward here, spreading over Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, just about all of the southern Bering Sea, including the Aleutians. And then for the afternoon, that makes a jog up to the north here and pushes up into western Cook Inlet and into Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, into the Gulf of Alaska, extending back to the west toward the main low center, which is crossing the Alaska Peninsula now, and IFR back toward the Pribilofs, narrow band there just south of St. Matthew Island. Otherwise marginal for the Aleutians, central and western Aleutians, staying pretty good over the northern Bering Sea and the central interior up to the western Arctic coast. Then for Saturday morning, some IFR, Arctic coast north slope, better conditions south of the Brooks Range till you get down into southern Alaska here, and quite a band of IFR. Bristol Bay, southeast Bering Sea, right along the North Gulf Coast here up into Prince William Sound, and western slopes of the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Marginal VFR along the southern slopes of the central and eastern range there, with good VFR up in the Tanana Valley, 40-mile country. Northern Bering Sea still a lot of VFR there. And then seems like it deteriorates when you get off the ice edge. Band IFR over the north central Bering, marginal VFR for the Aleutians, IFR for the Panhandle, and then for Saturday afternoon, IFR southeast coast, IFR southern Alaska, VFR central areas all the way up to the Arctic coast. Again, the northern Bering Sea holding on to VFR, Seward Peninsula, and Kuskokwim Valley IFR into the eastern Yukon Kuskokwim Delta areas. Band of IFR here through the central Bering Sea, otherwise mostly marginal for the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. And for passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR, Adigan, IFR. For Lake Clark and Merrow, deteriorating conditions throughout the day, ceilings, visibilities coming down, thickening, lowering clouds. So IFR in the afternoon to the evening. Same trend for rainy as well, VFR becoming IFR. Windy, VFR becoming marginal VFR. That's going to be mainly on the southern entrance here, and VFR to the north. Isabel, same as windy, VFR becoming marginal VFR, mainly on the southern approach. And for Mentasta, optimistically, VFR for the entire day. Tonita, marginal. Portage, marginal VFR to IFR, probably by before noon. Chilcoot White, IFR. Freezing levels right near the Pribilofs now, up through Shelikof Strait, North Gulf Coast, and the Panhandle, 2,000 feet up over the southern southeast coast. And icing, a lot of moisture here spreading east-northeastward here. Low center track will take a turn across the Alaska Peninsula, front extending well out away from the low center there. So pretty good area of considerable moderate rime icing coming up the southern Kenai Peninsula, southern Prince William Sound, across the Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay area. Otherwise, light to isolated moderate rime icing extending back into Kuskokwim Bay, covering Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, and then starting to taper off here over the eastern Aleutians. Remainder of the state, not too bad, or icing-wise, none expected of significance. And the jet stream here, the main jet South of the forecast area, but you can see a weaker flow here at about 50 knots coming across the northern Bering Sea into the Seward Peninsula and eastward there across the Yukon Flats. 9,000 feet, we've got south winds 40 knots here coming across the Kenai Peninsula and Turnagain Arm area, Alyeska, southwest 45 knots there across Yakutat. 3,000 feet, southeast 55 knots. Right off the North Gulf Coast, 70 knots south of this low center, and northeast 40 turn northerly into the eastern Aleutians. Turbulence, big area of moderate turbulence expected here. North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, all across south central Alaska and western Alaska Range, Kodiak Island, and all the way out to about Atka Island, and all the way up to southern coast of Norton Sound, and maybe for the Seward Peninsula.
Venus, burning bright, the first star I see tonight. Hi, star friends, Trace here. Venus will be the first light you see in the west this week as the sun sets. Let me show you. We're looking west at sunset. As the sky darkens, the first light you'll see is the planet Venus. It's by far the brightest planet in our evening sky, but it's not the only one. Before it gets dark enough to see any stars, another planet will appear about 2/5 up and to the left of Venus. That's Jupiter. But if you wait until the sun is all the way down and face southeast, red Mars will be high in the sky all this week too. Venus is nearly the same size as Earth, but it has a toxic sulfuric acid atmosphere and a runaway greenhouse effect, meaning that the surface is basically a desolate hellscape. But hey, at least it looks pretty from here. Keep looking up.
We're at Vandenberg Air Force Base for about 20 minutes before the launch of ICESat-2. You might see the white light off in the distance. That's the Delta II rocket.
It kind of feels like an idea that was always going to just stay an idea. But no, it's real. It's sitting on top of the rocket.
You know, and for me, it's kind of surreal. Like you say, it's been 10 years and it's hard to believe. It's like, we're really here? This is really about to happen? It's totally cool.
This is Dr. Tom Newman. Over the years, his work has taken him to some pretty remote areas to study changes in the ice regions of our planet. And his research, among many others, has defined the goals of the new NASA satellite, the Ice, Cloud, and Land Elevation Satellite 2, or ICESat-2.
And we have ignition. And
the story of ICESat-2 really begins with ICESat-1. ICESat told us all kinds of cool things about the ice sheet and about sea ice that we didn't really know to ask. That data allowed us to measure elevation change of ice sheets in a way that we hadn't been able to before, and showed that all the action on the ice sheets, the places that were really changing quickly, were around the edges. So when we were thinking about what could we do better next time, we knew that was one key component.
In addition to the edges of the ice sheets, ICESat-2 needed to measure a dimension of sea ice that remained elusive: its thickness. To figure out how thick sea ice is, you can measure the height of ice sticking out of the ocean, or freeboard, and compare it to the height of water between the sea ice flows, called leads.
The problem is, sea ice is really dynamic, and those cracks open and close various places in the ice pack throughout the day, throughout the year, and what we need to do is have measurements of the ocean whenever it's available, wherever it occurs in the sea ice pack.
To solve that problem, ICESat-2 was designed with a fast pulsing laser instrument to take precise, near-continuous measurements across its 3 pairs of beams. For 10 years, everything about the mission was designed to measure rapid changes in the most rapidly changing part of the cryosphere. But it has to get into space first.
But it's a huge transition going from the ground to in space. We've spent better part of 10 years, thousands of people have been involved, and actually seeing the rocket there on the pad with all of that work kind of all put together in one place, it's pretty amazing. And then getting up in the middle of the night to go watch the actual launch, it's sort of surreal in a way, because you've put so much time into it for so long, and actually seeing it over there is like, whoa, you know, it's a big deal.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. That's off. That's 1.
That was awesome. Totally cool. There it went. That was Atlas. The last Delta II, heading on out.
So Atlas has been turned on over the course of the first few weeks of the mission, really culminating for us with the laser. So this is our first look at sea ice data from ICESat-2, and it looks fantastic. The signal levels look great. We've got plenty of photons there. We're capturing ridges. We can clearly see the ocean. All sorts of cool stuff in there, and this is just our first data. It's only going to get better from here on out.
The data from ICESat-2 is well on its way into digging deeper into the unknown dimensions of sea ice sheets, and glaciers. It will shed light on changes in sea level and global weather patterns, and once again find new things about ice we didn't know to ask.
So my heart is definitely racing. I don't know about anyone else's. This is the stuff nerds dream of.
Slight chance the flight may see ICESat-2 in their center windscreen. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, that's gonna 5, 4, 3, 2.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the marine forecast here for the southeast coast, northwest winds for the day Friday, 30 knots, 16-foot seas, and for the north coast, south to west winds, 25 knots. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inner channels, north winds at 15. Stevens Passage, southeast at 15, and then southeast winds 20 knots for Clarence Strait with 7-foot seas. And then for Saturday, gale warnings. As that next front begins to approach the coast, so it'll be coming up to 35 knots in the afternoon, seas building to around 20 feet in the south coast. Gale warnings also on the north coast, increasing south to southwest winds up to 35 knots, and southeast 25 knots for the northern inner channels, and for Stevens Passage, southeast at 25, and for Clarence Strait, south winds 30 knots, seas 6 feet. Prince William Sound for Friday, northeast winds at 30 knots. Same thing for Northern Cook Inlet, northeast winds 30 knots. And for the North Gulf Coast, eastern North Gulf Coast, south winds at 40 knots. Higher gales for the western North Gulf Coast, east at 45 knots. Southeast 45 for the Barren Islands. Storm warnings for Kamishak Bay. Tomorrow's northeast winds 50 knots. And full gales for Southern Cook Inlet. Winds out of the northeast at 45 knots. And for Saturday, Cook Inlet, north winds 20 to 30 knots, northwest 30 knots, Kamishak Bay, Barren Islands west at 30 knots. And for the North Gulf Coast, south winds 25 to 30 knots, and Prince William Sound, winds coming down to 15 knots out of the east. Kodiak Island, gale warnings tomorrow, east to southeast winds at 35 knots. Gale warnings also for the Alaska Peninsula, especially on the Pacific side here, southwest of 45 knots. And for Bristol Bay, east winds at 40 knots. And then for Saturday, Alaska Peninsula, northwesterlies 25 to 30 knots, Bristol Bay, northwest at 30 knots. And Kodiak Island, west winds 25 to 35 knots. For the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, gale warnings, north to northwest winds 35 to 45 knots. And the central Aleutians, gale warnings, north to northwest 35 to 40 knots. Small craft advisories for the western Aleutians, north to northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, or 25 to 30 knots. Anyway, for the Saturday time frame, definitely lighter winds out there, north to northeast at 20 knots. Winds coming down 15 to 20 knots for Adak and Atka, And for the eastern Aleutians, northwest to northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. And for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, gale warnings, northeast at 40 tomorrow, north 45 knots for the Pribilofs with 20-foot seas. Yukon Delta coast, St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, all north at 25 to 30 knots. And for Saturday, north 30 knots, St. Lawrence Island, northwest 30 knots for the southwest coast. And for the Pribilofs, northwest winds 25 knots, St. Matthew Island, northwest at 25. And for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast tomorrow, up here, there, brisk wind advisories, east winds 25 knots, central and western Arctic coast east-northeast at 20 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea, brisk wind advisories, north winds at 25 knots. And then for Saturday, for the Arctic coast, western, central, eastern, brisk wind advisories, east winds 25 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea, north winds at 25 knots. And looking at tonight again, still a weak trough up here, keeping some snow showers and areas of light snow, fog, all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast, down in toward the just north of Fairbanks. Dry southern interior should clear out, hopefully. Areas of Cook Inlet, if it does, areas that clear out will fall below zero, but winter weather advisories, snow blowing snow in the increased Bristol Bay into Kodiak Island. Several inches expected through these areas. Blizzard warning tonight until 1 p.m. for the Pribilof Islands. High wind warning ends at 7 p.m. for the central Aleutians. In the Panhandle, rain and snow showers becoming a little less widespread tomorrow. Kind of a break. This may actually end temporarily, but more moisture coming in as that front pushes in. Same thing for southern Alaska, snow inland, rain and snow along the coast, rain and snow Kodiak Island, fair in the interior, chance of light snow up to the north. And winds definitely lighter for the Aleutians tomorrow on southern Bering Sea. And then for Saturday, a new system comes up to the northeast. The old one kind of troughs out here over the southwest interior, leaving a lot of light snow and snow showers behind. And snow showers and snow for the Alaska Peninsula, and dry over the northern interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.